Did you hear the one about the ADHD podcaster who tried to interview the ADHD psychologist? Well, today you're about to. In episode number 88, I got to sit down with Dr. Beth Capici, and we talked about all things ADHD, like the typical characteristics, the strengths of people who struggle with this, how to know if you have it, and what are some next steps to not just live with it, but thrive with ADHD. If you or anyone you know or love, and I mean think brother, sister, spouse, child, or friend, might show signs of ADHD, you will not want to miss all the wisdom Dr. Beth has for you today. So listen in. Do you feel like you've been given a raw deal? Like maybe things did not go the way you'd imagined, or like you're struggling at times to just hang on to the faith that you wholeheartedly believe in? Well, my friend, you have come to the right place, and you are not alone. I'm Shelly Sneed, your host of Unperfect, and it's my weekly mission to inspire women just like you and me to persevere in faith through authentic stories and experiences that are rooted in the truth of God's Word. So hang on. Hope and probably some humor are coming up. Well, I'm excited today to be here with Beth Capici. Beth is a licensed counselor with a private practice in Chattanooga, Tennessee. She and her husband have been married for 21 years and have 3 children. And she also hosts the Never Perfect Faith podcast, where she shares beautiful stories of inspiring people. Beth has a huge passion for helping others become comfortable in their own skin and lowering the bar for them so they can live in the freest and fullest way possible, which is what makes her the perfect guest to be here on Unperfect.
Yay.
So welcome, Beth.
Thank you so much. I'm excited. It's so uncanny that we both have such similar kind of perspectives on life and missions and callings. And I'm just so glad that our mutual friend Jennifer Shepard connected us.
Yes, I was going to mention her too, because we both adore her. She was my best friend in high school, and you got to know her in college. And she basically said, you two ladies are on the same page. Y'all should meet. So, but life just kept happening to us this past year. So I'm glad that we finally were able to get together.
Me too. I'm so excited. This is going to be fun.
It is. So just for fun to start off, tell me one thing that maybe people may not know about you, or one interesting thing that might be fun for our listeners to know.
Well, I know we're going to go into me having ADHD, and so we'll talk more about that later. But one of the pieces of ADHD is generally having trouble making decisions. So when you sent me some potential questions today, of course, I was like, I narrowed it down to like 2 or 3 ideas. And you, in our chatting right before this interview, made me lean towards this one. I was going to focus on having a husband from Scotland and just loving international people. But I think this will be even more fun because you mentioned like laughter. And this is just maybe something thought-provoking for the listeners as well, is I find it fascinating the impression that people get of you when they meet you. And so I have people, especially in college, and probably now too, that think I am like very reserved and proper and kind of refined and polite. And then I have others that think I'm the goofiest, silliest person and they could never take me seriously. And it would always kind of surprise me because people that know me well, I don't know where they would lean in terms of which way, but they know that I can be very serious and deep, and I can also be the dumbest, goofiest, right, spaciest prankster. And I love to, tell stories. So I would have some people say, I cannot imagine you playing a prank on somebody. You're just so like polite and refined. And then someone else would say, I just can't imagine you teaching a university level class or a master's level class because I would be cracking up because you're so silly. And so I think it's kind of interesting how that happens in life, where I'm like, I'm not trying to be different places, right, but people see you in certain contexts or limited arenas, or they may, sort of make their impression based on like one interaction. And I think we're all just multifaceted. So I guess that's something interesting about me, is I am really a huge goofball. And then I should say I'm a psychologist. So I got my master's at Vanderbilt in counseling. And then I got my doctorate at UTK, Tennessee in Knoxville, because I thought I might want to be a college professor. And typically they want you to have a PhD to do that. So I do the same. I am a counselor, therapist, do very same thing, really. I just have a few more years of school. And I ended up not going. I did teach a little bit, but it was for my ADD, it was way too much preparation and homework. And I'm like, I don't know if I want to have these due dates and assignments and deadlines for the rest of my life. So kind of steered away from
That's fascinating because I'm a musician, actually. That's kind of was what I thought I was going to do with my life. And I have done here and there, but I taught music but the teaching part, I burn out so fast.
Yes.
And it was because I was so ADHD, which we're just jumping right into the topic here. But so that's interesting. I'm sure there are some wonderful teachers that are highly distracted, but it was too much. The organization was too much for me. And I love what you said about the multifaceted, because it reminded me of a story when I worked at Camp Crestridge for girls in the summers. After I'd been there a while and had a more leadership position, I had gotten to know another girl who's on staff there. And I remember her saying to me something very similar. She was like, gosh, I used to think you were like so spiritual and whatever. And she didn't mean it as an insult, like now you're this hoodlum. But I think it's what you said. She had only seen me in position. She hadn't seen my like everyday side, we're hanging out friends, just seen me on a stage or something, I guess. But
see, and I love that. That just, sparked another idea. I think that the impression that people have of Christians is, there could be a stereotype, and that is one reason that I started my Never Perfect Faith podcast. I like to say that Christians, in my opinion, should be the most loving, humble, compassionate, non-judgmental people in the world. And because we are not going to heaven because we are good people, we are no better than non-Christians. So I just really want to make that really clear, and I hope that's clear to people, is our good works follow the faith that transforms us.
That's right.
And Jesus and, the Holy Spirit living in us is not us. It's no credit to us. But it is interesting to hear. You might say, oh, Christians are the most giving, loving, accepting people, or, oh, Christians are just jerks and they're heartless and they're judging. And it's like, oh, no, that's just heartbreaking to hear, because Jesus wasn't like that at all.
Absolutely. And that's what I was thinking while you were talking, was the person we want to emulate was the most compassionate person that ever lived. So I love that. Well, I am excited today to keep picking your brain about ADHD, particularly in women. And I have to laugh because when I was kind of preparing for this interview the other day, I was working at a table with a friend of mine, Jody, and we get together about once a month to work at a Chick-fil-A. And she came with this sticky note, and it was a neat little list of everything that she was going to accomplish that day. And I arrived with a bag full of loose papers, receipts, notebooks, a laptop. But I had that unwavering hope that I was going to accomplish a month's work in just a few hours. So I just thought, that just got me tickled as even getting ready for this. There's such a difference between people that are wired the way I am and maybe wired the way she is. But I love one thing I heard you say in one of your other podcasts was that ADHD is one of your greatest weaknesses and one of your greatest strengths. So I just thought, we're going to turn this on its head for a minute. And I want to start off with the strengths, because I am very quick to see how my ADHD ruins my life sometimes, or, puts a lot of hurdles in what should have been an easy thing to accomplish. So I just wonder, tell me how you see ADHD as one of your greatest strengths.
Oh, yeah. So if you Google strengths and weaknesses of people with ADHD, you'll find so many articles. And this is what I did when I did a podcast a couple years ago. I think it was called The Many Facets of ADHD on my Never Perfect Dr. Beth podcast. So you can hear more about that if you want to go and, kind of search that. But some of the ones that pop to my mind that I love are people that are creative and they think outside the box and they see the big picture. And I've personally found, I think most people that I know that have ADHD are kind of, I don't want to necessarily say humble, but that's kind of what I'm getting at. They're sort of, they don't take themselves too seriously, and they sort of downplay their strengths, like, they don't want to throw around titles or, brag about their success. And I do think people can take that too far, where there's a humility that you're like, I won't tell anyone any strengths, or I'm not going to share any of my accomplishments. You can take it too far. But yeah, just sort of down to earth maybe is a way that I've seen. I've had a lot of very successful female clients with ADHD. I have friends that are doctors that have ADHD, and they just they don't act arrogant. They don't walk around going, I'm a physician. And I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying it's interesting to me that they're just trying to be a person, and they don't necessarily care if you know what they do or don't do, so, but yeah, Googling that, definitely quick thinkers too. One of the things that I've heard, we kind of jump steps, and we kind of can figure things out quickly, and it's kind of a different thinking pattern. And then you have to sometimes go back and explain to people how you got there, because they'll go, how did you figure that out? I just had a teenager in my office yesterday with her mom, and she was recently diagnosed with ADHD. And her mom said when she was even a baby, she would problem solve really well and figure out things really well. And she would be like, this kid just thinks differently and has these crazy superpowers. So, but definitely, I think those are some of the big ones, just the creativity, thinking outside the box, and seeing the big picture, and some of those types of things.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the one you said, because I'd never heard that before, about not taking yourself too seriously, being down to earth or whatever. And that's interesting, because that is why I started this podcast, and kind of the focus of my writing is because I used to get on Facebook, and, you see people with their perfect little whatever. And I'd be like, we got out of Walmart today without stealing anything. Yay. And it was like, but that's when I started noticing that there were women out there who were like, oh, I'm not alone. Like, finding those people that, wanted to have a community of unperfect people. So
exactly.
I never attributed that to that, probably being a part of my ADHD.
Yeah.
Definitely probably is.
I think that, with the two podcasts, really, I'm trying to share hope and vulnerability, modeling of like, I don't mind telling everybody in the world that I have ADHD, and, or anxiety is another thing I'm really passionate about. And just so many people live with debilitating anxiety, and it's so, so difficult, but yet they're some of the most caring, conscientious, like hard workers, big hearted. I say they care too much, they try too hard, they think too much, and they have trouble letting things go. So I think no matter what your diagnosis is, people with bipolar, they're incredibly intelligent. They're often incredibly creative as well. Just don't think of things in one way, like, oh, this is why my diagnosis is bad. It's like, this is what's unique about my diagnosis. And
I love that.
We're just divergent. Like when you think of being neurologically typical, people say neurotypical versus neurodivergent. It's just kind of a different way of thinking. And there's a really wonderful specialist in ADHD that has a lot of podcasts on different platforms online. He's been interviewed. His name's Dr. William Dodson. But he said that ADHD people, that they have a different nervous system. And I think that's pretty much what it means to be neurodivergent. And that it's known, he said the three distinctive factors of an ADD nervous system are an interest-based nervous system. So if you're interested in something, you can pay attention. So he's like, it's really shouldn't be called inattention. It should be called inconsistent attention. Because if you love something or you're enjoying something, like I'm enjoying this conversation, I enjoy talking to my clients, I am all in. But if I'm bored or I'm trying to do my taxes or something I hate, I'm just like, I cannot focus. So the second piece is the emotional responsiveness, which It's really just kind of being more emotionally reactive or responsive, like quick to anger, quick to excitement, quick to getting your feelings hurt, maybe just being more emotional. And he calls it emotionally responsive, like high empathy,
Sure.
So, and then the third one is rejection sensitive dysphoria, which is when you feel rejected, you get very down or dysphoric. So that's what he thinks after his many, many years of specializing in ADD as a psychiatrist, that those are the hallmarks of an ADHD nervous system.
That is so fascinating. I'm just over here taking notes.
Yes. No. That's
because
good.
I just wrote a blog post about how reactive I am. Like something I've really had to work on emotionally. Like I can fly off the handle, or I can text my husband and we're in the middle of a crisis, where if I just slow down and like think through it and breathe, give myself a half an hour, I can probably figure this thing out.
Right. Yeah, that's right. It's probably part of the impulsivity. In fact, that same mother-daughter that was here yesterday, she was saying that it was helping her understand some of her daughter's previous behaviors, because she didn't know impulsivity was part of attention deficit if you look at the criteria. And we use like the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, the DSM like 5 or whatever version it's in now. It's probably in the 5R anyway. But that it could be interesting to look at the criteria that people use to diagnose, depression or ADHD. But you can find lots of checklists, and there's some pretty fun ones that I've found on even just like women or teenage women, because they can be a little unique. Sure. And I know that was kind of one of your questions. But I remember a brochure or handout in one of my previous jobs that was in the lobby, and it said ADHD in women or something. And it said, I don't remember all of it, but it said women with ADHD tend to have trouble with parenting and be overwhelmed by parenting, which is definitely true for me. And trouble with domestic stuff. But I have found, kind of going back to Dr. Dodson, that there are people that are different. Like, I had more trouble focusing in school for sure. I would procrastinate. Like, I had pulled all-nighters almost every single time I had to write a paper, especially. But then I have friends who are, medical doctors who won't make a quiche. And I'm like, it takes 10 minutes to make a quiche. And she's like, well, if I have to chop the bell pepper, I'm not going to do it. And I'm like, what? You went to med school and you won't even chop a bell pepper. And she said, yeah, and I buy apples all the time and they just go bad because I won't chop them. And so it's just so funny.
Yeah.
And I wish I could remember, there's a hilarious couple on Instagram you might have heard of. I think the man is always, and his wife loves it, like he's laughing at the inconsistencies of her ADHD. Like, she can't do this really easy thing, but she can do these really complicated things. Just the mental blocks we get. I mean, I have some definite stupid mental blocks that are just ridiculous. But then I can do a podcast, and it's like, that just doesn't make sense. Like,
Yeah, we were just talking about this before we hit record, because I can't find my keys. I can't find my phone. I can't find the water bottle that I just had in my hand 2 seconds ago. But but here I am doing a podcast.
Yeah.
It is crazy how.
Yeah, a lot of inconsistencies that are just very ironic and sometimes hilarious.
Right. Yeah, that is so true. And, as we're kind of moving into this question about an actual diagnosis, which I'm not going to have you like, we're not going to hold you to like, here are the exact same things that make someone have ADHD, because people should definitely go seek that.
Yeah, I'm happy to rattle off a few, but
I think for years I thought I have all these deficits. I'm unorganized. I'm lazy. I procrastinate. I don't finish anything I start. I'm late to everything. Like, I just saw these are personal flaws that I've got to figure out how to fix, and nothing works well because you can take someone else's plan, but good chance they're not ADHD. It just comes natural to them.
Right.
And they're, So just realizing even this late in life, that I'm kind of wired differently than especially my husband, who is the most organized man, type A on the planet.
That's funny.
But it's almost comforting, right? It's hopeful to go, okay, I'm not just crazy or can't get it together. There are physiological reasons why I can't get some of this stuff together. So you mentioned some. Are there any other things you want to mention that may set someone apart as having ADD or ADHD?
Yeah. Well, that list you just gave was really good, because I was like, that's part of the criteria. That's part of the criteria. Like not finishing things you start. And really the overall description of it is avoidance of or dislike of things that require sustained mental effort. So avoiding or disliking things that just require a lot of effort for you. Like my friend that thinks cutting up the bell pepper is a lot of effort, but she can go to med school, and, my mother is where I definitely think I got my ADHD, and she's also a therapist, but she was probably a little bit more conscientious as a student than I was. And I'm more, I don't know if conscientious is the right word, but I'm less overwhelmed by kitchen and domestic stuff. Like she'll go, oh, that's a lot of work. And I'm like, it's not really that much work. So she has ADHD a little bit more like my friend that's the doctor. But I have the hyperactivity. So this goes with one of the questions that you asked, which might be a helpful distinction. But everybody that has ADD has to have the inattention or the inconsistent attention. And so that's why it's called attention deficit disorder. But if you have the hyperactivity and the impulsivity as well, then that's where the H comes from. So I do have that. I don't think my mom has that. Like I hate waiting in lines. I fidget with my hair constantly. I've done that since high school at least. And so it's a lot of like trouble sitting still, trouble staying seated for a long time, trouble waiting in line, kind of having higher energy. Like kids, when you're younger, you might climb on your seat in class, or you're just like wild on the playground. So that's the reason ADD versus ADHD. They'll kind of say inattentive type or combined type if you have both. And I have the combined type. So
that's interesting. Yeah, I'm guessing I do too. But definitely the highly distracted, easily distracted. I think of that dog on Up that's like squirrel.
Yeah,
like that is me.
Yes.
And one of the reasons I had to get off social media, it wasn't so much a spiritual thing for me. I know some people get off for all different reasons, but for me it was, I will get on to ask someone a question, and 2 hours later, my listeners have heard me say this, I've bought a bathing suit I didn't need, and I've watched 200 videos of puppies. And I'm just like, what just happened?
Yes.
And I know they engineer that for people like me. I'm falling right into what they have designed it to do.
Yeah. Well, so another piece about ADHD that I think could be really helpful is that executive functioning is lacking in this. And like the frontal lobe of your brain, is kind of like the captain of your ship. And that is called the executive functioning, which could be really good to look up. But basically that is sort of like planning, organizing, prioritizing, structuring, just kind of any sort of decision making, and just the captain of the ship, basically. And a psychiatrist I used to work with said it's kind of like a ship with no captain. Like you've got this great engine, and a lot of those things are very difficult for me. I'm not good at planning ahead. Have a very hard time making decisions. And when I finally decided, okay, I have to start treating this, I know I have it. I think this is another trait of ADHD that could be a strength or a weakness. I'm very comfortable with gray, and I'm not a black and white person. And I didn't mind not knowing. I'm pretty sure I have it, but I don't really need to know for sure. And this actually goes with one of your questions that you were going to ask later, which is great. so I had a professor in my doctoral program that said, I'm pretty sure you have ADHD or ADD or whatever. And I said, yeah, okay, yeah, probably do. And then I have a friend that was a psychologist that said, I think you have ADHD. And I was like, yeah, I probably do. But I just never really had a huge need to like look into it. And so when I was probably like 35, I was sitting with a client and she was probably 21 or so. And she was reading this book called ADD Friendly Ways to Organize Your Life. And she was reading this little section, and my chin, of course I didn't outwardly show this, but my jaw was like on the floor. I was like, she said, they said that people with ADD have trouble making decisions. They have trouble prioritizing. They overcommit. They think everything's important, and they have trouble with time management. And I was like, okay, case closed. I was like, I obviously didn't say this in my session, but I went home that day and I was like, okay, I 100% have this. And that wasn't like the diagnostic criteria, but some of it relates to what you had said earlier. And so that's when I'm like, I really need to just kind of, move forward and getting this treated, or just learning how to understand myself better, knowing that I do have this and I need to research it more.
I'm pausing our discussion right there so you can absorb all that information without getting information overload, especially if you have ADHD. But I will play the final half of this interview in episode number 90. But I love the truths and distinctions that were shared in today's episode, and I would love to challenge you to consider the following things this week if you or someone you love is living with ADHD. Number one is this: take time to list the strengths that ADHD gives to you and the people around you. Yeah, the negative traits that come with this disorder can drive us and our families absolutely bonkers. But what does this unique neurodivergence bring to the table for you and your family? Does it make you more empathetic or flexible? Are you a go-getter during crunch time, or able to accomplish a lot with a last-minute deadline? Maybe you're fun, creative, compassionate, or spontaneous. You don't just have to own the frustrating parts. So celebrate the ways that Psalm 139 makes clear you were fearfully and wonderfully made by a very creative God. I would also add here, if you aren't the one with ADHD, but that person living in your house about to get on your ever-loving last nerve is, you go back and do number one. Take time to list their strengths and the traits they possess that bring you joy and meaning. This is a first step toward empathy. Number two, recognize that you're not a failure. Your nervous system is built different. So, if you're a woman with ADHD who struggles with parenting or domestic things or staying focused on or finishing things you're not really passionate about, you're not less than, okay? You just need some strategies that will help you stay focused during these times, like accountability. We're going to talk about some of the next steps and strategies in episode number 90. So hang in there until then. Number three, maybe you need to Google the traits of ADHD and see if this is something that's describing you. Again, the key takeaway of this episode is to give yourself and your loved ones some grace. We got to start there. Next episode, we'll talk some shop on dealing with some of the negatives. And number four, we didn't really go into detail on this, but this is something I'm focusing on, so I'm going to throw it out there for you. Is your phone serving you if you already struggle with attention? I know we only brought this up briefly, but along with other research I've been reading and past podcasts, I can link to the one interview I did with Sandy Cooper, which was fabulous on social media. But I have to bring this up. Take some steps to decrease your need to be on your phone. I just bought a new alarm clock because the one I have has a blaring beep that will wake up the neighborhood. But I got this one so that I can start leaving my phone in the bathroom and no longer by my bed in the evenings or in the mornings. And I'm determined to not pick it up in the morning until I'm done spending some time praying and in the Word. You can also turn the color filter on so that your screen is black and white. I know you can do this with iPhones. This has actually been proven to reduce the time people want to be on their phones. So whatever works for you, just think through if that's something you need to be intentional about. The average person spends 2 hours on social media a day, and we ADHDers do not have 2 hours to waste. Finally, if today's episode resonated with you, would you take a second to forward it to a friend? And real quick, before you head to your next podcast or activity, please leave a positive rating. It's so quick and easy, and it helps other unperfect people like us find the podcast so they can be encouraged too. Want to make sure you never miss an episode, plus get a letter from me about what God's teaching me each week straight to your inbox? Click on the link in the show notes to sign up for my newsletter, Musings for Unperfect Ponderers. There's a free resource I'd love to get to you when you do. As always, I'm praying that you're able to see glimpses of God's glory in the now and the not yet of your unperfect life this week. I'll see you next time.